Hey everybody, welcome to Proverbs on the Patio. I can't believe it is mid-June, almost late June, and it's cold, it's rainy, it's wet. Not at all what I expected, but at least I'm not sweating in June. So I'm pumped to jump into Proverbs chapter 1. I hope you've had a chance to read through it over the last couple of days. I'm going to pick out a few key verses, and I really want to jump in to this idea of wisdom. Before we do, I want to give you some updates and some information that I'm going to share a little more about at the end of tonight's study. Today, Governor Northam informed us that we would not be entering phase 3 at the end of this week, but he did say that everything looked promising. Our case numbers in the state of Virginia continue to decline. There are rising numbers of cases around the country, but our state, I believe, because many of our churches, our businesses, our local governments have done a lot to keep people indoors, and our case numbers are on the decline. And that's great news. So when and if the state of Virginia enters phase 3, that'll be good news for us as a church. That'll open the doors for us to have full services. Just all the restrictions that were put on, a lot of those will be lifted. But anyways, we'll talk more about that at the end of tonight's study. So I want to talk to you tonight about this idea of wisdom. Proverbs chapter 1 really lays the groundwork. We talked about verses 1 through 9 last week, so I'm not going to rehash that. But the purpose of this book is to help us gain wisdom. So I want to start with this idea. Why do you need wisdom? Why do I need wisdom? We live in the information age. I have more data, more knowledge available to me than ever before. And here's what I mean. A lot of us don't even take time to learn things because we know we can have our phone near us, and at any time I can pick it up and say, Siri, what does this mean? Google, what about this? And I can watch a YouTube video to figure something out. So we have more data, more information than ever before, but data, information, and knowledge are not the same as wisdom. Now, data is one thing, information's the next. Knowledge is important, but wisdom is knowing what to do with the data, with the information, and with the knowledge that we have. We live in an age where a lot of people have information. Some have false information, some have good information, but we don't always know what to do with it. So here's the truth. More than ever before, we as believers need to be people of wisdom. Wisdom would tell us how to respond to our brothers and sisters when they're dealing with injustice, how to fight for them, how to stand up for them, how not just to get angry and not make a difference, but how to respond righteously, how to respond to power, how to speak up on their behalf, how to make sure that injustices are righted and wrongs are righted. And on the flip side of that, when we are wronged, wisdom shows us how to respond, how not just to get angry, but to know what to do about it, how to respond in the best possible way to see the outcome that we're hoping for, but also to honor the Lord in our responses. So wisdom doesn't just look at a situation and lay out the facts. Wisdom looks at a situation, sees the facts, and sees how we should respond. We as God's people should be known as people of wisdom. I'm actually going to do something reverse tonight. I'm not going to start with verse 1. I talked about verses 1 through 9 last week. I'm not going to start with verse 10. I'm going to ask you to skip all the way to verse 33, and I want you to see the purpose, the plan, really the outcome that we all want. In Proverbs chapter 1, verse 33 goes like this. It says in the ESV, "But whoever listens to me," that's wisdom, "will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread of disaster." The King James puts it this way, "Whoever but whoso hearkeneth unto me shall dwell safely and shall be quiet from fear of evil." That's where we all want to get to. We all want to live out verse 33. We want to live a life that is secure. We're not afraid of disaster. We're not super anxious about what may or may not happen. That's the life we all want. So the question becomes, how do we get to verse 33? Well, the chapter lays it out for us. And it really lays out two competing voices that we wrestle with and that we struggle with all throughout this life. So I'm going to point your attention now to verse 10, okay? In verse 10, he's laid out verses 1 through 9, what the book is about, what this chapter is about. And then in verse 10, he says this. He says, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent." He says, people are going to, for the rest of your life, you're going to hear some voices. One of them is going to be people trying to draw you in to their wickedness. Here's the crazy part about sin. Most of us want to sin with people. We never want to be alone in something. This is the power of community. This is really the power of the church, right? We find faith in community, but community can also be turned on its head when you get people doing wrong things together, when you get people really encouraging one another to do wrong. There's this false sense of security, and this must be okay. It's kind of like somebody who's doing something wrong, and then somebody comes along and they join in with, they're like, oh, well, if you're okay with it and I'm okay with it, it must be okay. Now in this passage, he's going to lay out a couple of ways this takes place. And you can fill in any sin here. It could be the sin of stealing. They're going to talk about the sin of murder. They're going to talk about the sin of ambushing, taking advantage of others. Whatever the sin is, we love to do it together. It's kind of like if you're at work and somebody has been skimming off the top and they invite you to join in with them. Now you're both skimming off the top. You're stealing company money, taking advantage of benefits, whatever it is. And because you're both doing it, you feel like it's okay because they wouldn't do it if it was wrong and I wouldn't do it if it was wrong. And together, it feels better. And one thing leads to another, and now you're tied together. You're involved in ways you didn't think you would ever be involved, and you have to keep their secret. They have to keep your secret. So in verse 11, he says, if they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Now this is not just stealing. This is murder. Let us ambush the innocent without reason. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive. He says this is what it's going to look like. It's always going to lead farther and take you farther than you want to go. And then in verse 14, it turns the corner. It says, throw in your lot among us. We will have one purse. It's kind of like the idea of somebody who says, hey, come do this with me. Hey, now you're one of us. And if you succeed, we succeed. If we fail, you fail. It's the idea of a gang. That's really what's coming out here. It's the idea of a common goal, a common idea, and not a good one. Wickedness is the key. He says, my son, don't walk with them. Hold back your foot from their paths. Don't even spend time with them. This is why we're careful who we associate with, who we get into business with, who we really tie ourselves to. This is not to say that we don't have conversations, we don't spend time. Look, I have lots of people that I spend time with who are far from Jesus. Man, they've got all kinds of things going on in their life, but I don't throw in my lot with them. I'm not going to go down that road with them. I'm not going to entertain the idea of getting involved with the things they're involved with. I'm their friend. I'm there to love them and to point them to Jesus. He's saying here, hey, don't start walking in lockstep with the wrong people. And we all know what that looks like. We remember when our parents talked to us about this. And there's this idea that wisdom, godly wisdom, divine wisdom here is a principle, a set of principles that if you follow them, it will lead to righteous outcomes. It'll lead to good outcomes, blessings instead of curses. He says on the flip side, when you go down the wrong path, more often than not, you're going to get caught. You're going to get in trouble. There's going to be consequences to your sin, to these ways. So this is the first voice he lays out for us. In our lives, we're going to have constant temptation from other people and even in our own heart, because let's be honest, sin is fun. Whether it's the sin of taking something that's not ours, indulging in something that is not right, sin has pleasure for a season, the Bible tells us. So we're not going to make any bones about it. Sin can be fun for a season, but the consequences always come down the road. Somebody once said if the penalty of sin was paid up front, nobody would do it, right? A lot of us enjoy things, we get away with things, and then we get caught, and man, the penalty is terrible. If only we had known early on. And that's what the Father is saying to the Son here. Be careful, watch your step, be careful who you hang around. So he goes on to say, this is a lifestyle you want to avoid. In verse 19, he puts it this way, such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors. There is a deeper principle here than just being greedy for unjust gain. I remember years ago, I used to watch one of these reality shows about detectives, and in this case, they were following some mob members, mafia guys, and the FBI detectives began talking in an interview about how they had tailed these mafia guys, and how immature and childish their conversations always were. They had them bugged, and they said every day, all they did was drive around and talk about ways to rob people, scam people, steal money, get money at whatever cost. And he said some of their ideas were ludicrous, just stupid and dumb, and it was almost funny how inadequate and inept they were as thieves. He said, but on the flip side, it began to break your heart. Like, this is just what these guys are given to. And this verse says that when we're greedy for unjust gain, it takes away our life. And the point here is, like, there are people who literally spend all day, every day thinking of ways to get money. In this case, it's unjust, but I would even take it a step further, and if we're not careful, even in just ways. We just think about money, and money becomes the idol, the thing. And I understand that some of you watching this, man, you have had seasons in your life, maybe a season right now, where you're struggling financially. You're below the poverty line, and you need money. It is a tool you need to feed your family, to care for your family. I understand that. What we're talking about here is when the desire for unjust gain, for money, for money's sake, robs you of life itself. You begin doing things, anything, just to get your hands on some dollars. You and I were not meant to live for money. Long after I'm gone, people aren't going to remember how much money I had. They're not going to remember what kind of car I drove or the home I lived in. They're going to remember Mark, the words that he spoke, the life that he lived. Now, money is a tool that I use to put a roof over my head. It's a tool that I use even to bless people when we're generous. But it's not the point of life. So this verse here, verse 19, always sticks out to me. He says, such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors. Don't ever let your possessions rob you of this life. Don't ever let something rob you of the bigger thing, the life you've been called to live. Jesus said, I came to give you life and life more abundant. Not more stuff in life, but more out of life for what life is truly about. That is to have a relationship with God that fully awakens us, not only to our soul and to eternity, but to what life is all about. It's not about me, right? The American dream or the American scheme says, hey, it's all about you, and that is empty. You could live the rest of your days getting everything you want, and you will find emptiness in that. There is no satisfaction in always having more. The idea is, Jesus said, you are not created to live for yourself, to worship yourself. You're created to love God, worship God, and serve and love others. So, verse 19 always sticks out to me, but then in verse 20, we're introduced to the second voice that we all deal with. The Father says, hey, don't listen to this first voice. It's sin, it's sinners, it's people who want to get you into trouble. They want you to throw their lot in with them. They see who you are. They want to use they want to leverage your reputation. Don't do that. Don't go down that road. Then he says there's a second voice in verse 20. Wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the markets, she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy street, she cries out. Solomon says, wisdom is out there. It's out there crying out. It's right in front of you. Learn to hear wisdom and to listen to wisdom and to follow wisdom. And then he goes down in verse 29, as 21 through 28, he really talks about what wisdom is and how wisdom is crying out and no one's listening to her. And so wisdom says, listen, they're going to face the consequences for their sin. And in verse 29, says this way, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. There are consequences to not honoring God, not respecting the Lord, not respecting his ways, his plan, whether it be what his word says or what his plan for our lives is, or in a greater sense of the word, like not respecting and fearing the way that God made things work. There are laws that are put into place that we all understand. The physical laws of gravity, time, and space. God created those laws, but there are also spiritual laws. Like there's a reason that God intends for us to live a certain way. It's not to bound us in or to keep us from fun. It's to protect our soul, our heart, to protect our very lives from things that would do harm to us. Not just the guilt and shame that are associated with sin, but the consequences that come as a result of sin. They don't just affect us. They often affect the lives of the people around us. They affect the people we love the most. So he lays out here that wisdom is really crying out, but no one's listening to her because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. I don't care how you feel about the laws of gravity. The laws of gravity are the laws of gravity. Like I wish I could fly, but I can't, right? So he says the same is true of spiritual laws. When we hate God's wisdom, God's knowledge, God's plan, we're saying we have a better way, we have a better plan, we have a better idea, and it never works out. He says in verse 30, would have none of my counsel, despised all my reproof, therefore they shall eat the fruit of their way. This is the consequence. And have their fill of their own devices. For the simple are killed by their turning away, and complacency of fools destroys them. And then it leads us to the very place we began, verse 33, and I want to read it again. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure, be at ease, and without dread of disaster. That is the dream that we all have. That dream is not realized by just having money. I know lots of people with money who don't have wisdom. They don't hold on to their money very long, or even if they hold on to their money, they don't have much to show because their money gets them into trouble. The idea here is this: power, success, all of the trappings of this life can't lead to ease, security, and a real peace that lets us not have dread of disaster. That only comes from wisdom. Here's what that looks like. When you lose everything, when life falls apart, and you still have wisdom, you know that God is on the throne, God has a plan, and you aren't just haphazardly sailing through this life. You've seen through the years that, man, God's ways are better than my ways. I will learn from this. I will recover from this. This is not the end. A fool says, oh, this is it. I'm done. I'm cursed. This is it. God forgot about me. But wisdom says, no, I will get through this. I will find a way. The Lord is with me. If the Lord be with me, who can stand against me? And wisdom is the difference between just having knowledge and living with a little bit of experience. Here's what I mean. I actually have more information, data, and knowledge than my grandparents. What I'm saying is this, before you say, no, you don't. I know how to use technology in ways that leverage knowledge, leverage data, leverage information in ways that my grandparents don't. They struggle with their phones. They can't really use Google or Siri. And so I have more access to information, knowledge, and data than they ever did. But a lot of times they have more wisdom in any given situation or circumstance because they've lived longer than me. They know how people are. They know how people operate. They know how to tell when people are being truthful with them. They've seen enough of this life to know the difference between what they want to hear and what is truth and what is actually taking place. So wisdom is something that actually gives us more peace because we've seen God work in our past. We've seen God work this out for others. I think of Job. Job is cursed, right? Everyone around him says, there's something wrong with you. You're broken. He's like, no, I've been honest with God. I've been faithful. But seemingly he's been cursed because like his family is dying left and right. His wife is turned on him. He loses his fortune. People come in and steal all of his wealth. But he wisely says, man, God has been good to me. How could I curse him now because I've had a few rough weeks? Like the Lord has been good. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Wisdom says it's not about my current circumstance. Wisdom says it's not about what's going right for me or wrong for me. I know who the Lord is. I know how this life works. And this is really where peace comes in, y'all. Once you kind of see how life works, you don't get so afraid of what may or may not happen. I'll put it this way. When you have lived a little bit, you're not 21 years old, not 21-year-olds, but you've seen how the world works. You've seen how greed works. You've seen the rises of the stock market. And when Warren Buffett says, when everybody else gets greedy, I get conservative. When everyone else gets conservative, I get greedy. Or when everyone else gets afraid, I get greedy. Like there's reasons the world works this way. And when you begin to see this, you begin to understand how most humans operate. You begin to have wisdom and you begin to understand, the Lord has a plan here, and his principles, man, they're effective. If I invest, and Proverbs talks about investing. If I invest wisely, if I live below my means, that comes up in Proverbs. If I take care of my family's needs as I should, there is a path forward that even if disaster strikes, I know what to do. I know how to respond. I am not somebody who can be carried around by other people's desires. I know what to do. I know how to respond. And that wisdom gives you peace. Whether we're talking about financial peace, emotional peace, spiritual peace, relational peace, this wisdom can really permeate every area of our lives. So I want to kind of close with this idea. As you read through Proverbs chapter 1 this week, and as you're going to read through Proverbs chapter 2 next week, what is it, which area of your life do you most need wisdom? For some of us, it's financial wisdom. I just need to know how to control my spending. Or I just need to know, how to trust the Lord in the area of my finances. Maybe it's more relational. I always respond in anger. Proverbs talks often about how we are to respond. With fools, or with people we love, or people that love us. There is so much good information here, but it's not just knowledge the Lord wants us to have. It's wisdom. And I want to say this, and I'll wrap it up. I believe that the problem with the American church today, most of us have lots of good information. We have more theology at our fingertips. You could have all kinds of resources on your phone. I do. I have more theological information on my phone in a Bible app that I use than hundreds of generations before me. But it's not just knowledge I need, it's wisdom. Too many Christians have all the knowledge. They've memorized verses. They know what the word is. They know what the word says, but they never do anything with it. That's a lack of wisdom. When we have knowledge of God's word, it should lead us to action in our own lives. It shouldn't just be something we say or claim. It should be something we live out. We shouldn't be people who tell others to repent, but there's no repentance in our lives. We shouldn't be people who tell others that Jesus changes lives if he hasn't changed our lives. Wisdom says it's not just about the information and the knowledge. That's part of it. Now I put it into practice. And as we go through this book, I believe that wisdom can change every area of your life. Not just wisdom in the worldly sense. This is divine wisdom. This is Holy Spirit inspired wisdom that God gave to Solomon. God appeared to Solomon early on in his leadership position as king. He said, I'll give you anything you want. Solomon wisely chose, God, give me wisdom. And so God blessed him with wisdom plus everything most of us would have asked for, right? Wealth, power, fame, success. And as a result, Solomon was extremely wise in his dealings with people, but also in what he wrote. And God gave him some wisdom to share with us. And it has withstood the test of time. These are principles that if we follow in our lives, they will not just lead to good success physically, emotionally, materially, financially, but spiritually. We can have wisdom that carries over into every area of our lives, regardless of what's going on outside of us, regardless of the things outside of our control. We can have this wisdom that leads to blessing after blessing after blessing. So, here's the good news. Wisdom's crying out. She's screaming at the top of her lungs, "Here I am, take hold of me!" And most people miss it. Don't miss it. Here it is. Let's take hold of wisdom. So, my homework for you next week, all right? Before next Wednesday, read Proverbs chapter 2. We'll do the same thing. I'll dive in. We'll talk about some specific verses. And once we get to chapter 10, we're really going to roll through a couple of chapters at a time. But the next few chapters are really important that we go chapter by chapter and really focus on some key verses in those chapters. So, now that we've wrapped up our study tonight, I hope you, get some time to marinate on it, think on it. I want to share with you some information that, we were discussing today with our staff and leaders. All afternoon we talked and planned about our outdoor service coming up on June 28th. We've decided instead of 9 a.m. we're going to put it at 9:30. I know you guys want to sleep in that extra 30 minutes, and I do too. And we usually have a service at 9:30. So 9:30 on June 28th, we're going to attempt a live, in-person, outdoor service, all right? And we're going to do our best to stream it from outside the building. So those of you who aren't ready to come yet, maybe you've got, maybe you've been running a fever, maybe you've been sick, maybe you have a compromised immune system, whatever the reason, feel free to stay home. But those of you who want to get back together, 9:30 on June 28th is going to be our first get together again. It's going to be a short service out front of the church building. You can park in the rear. Now, no sooner than we go through all these details, I saw on the news that Governor Northam said we're not entering phase 3 yet, but it may be sooner than we had thought. So he used the word days instead of weeks. Phase 3 is a big, big deal. It removes a lot of the limitations and bans, not just on churches, but on everything, and specifically on 50% capacity limits and those types of things. Now, we're still going to have to clean everything, and we're more than willing to do that. We're still going to have to use our best to socially distance, but it really will make church a lot easier to do inside once phase 3 is entered in the state of Virginia. And I just want to say, hey, you and every other Virginian, way to go, y'all. I mean, thank you. When literally other states have cases rising and hospitalization rates rising, we're decreasing. And I believe it's because a lot of our businesses, a lot of our churches, a lot of our people, we took one for the team. And we went out of our way to love our neighbors, to protect the most vulnerable in our society. And I know we're never going to get a pat on the back or a high five, but that's a big, big deal. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I do want to say, when we get back together, some people are going to, they're going to want to wear a mask. Others, I've already had people close to me argue about whether or not they're wearing masks. Guys, here's the beauty of the situation. We are going to have grace for one another in this season, in the next season, whatever phase 3 looks like, phase 4, because here lately, every and anything has turned into a debate and an argument and a division. Guys, I want you to hear me say this. When our church gets together, we are not going to argue over small things. We are going to celebrate Jesus, how he unites us, and it's going to be grace-filled. There's going to be so much joy. It's going to be great. So, June 28th, as we know, we're going to do that outside. Outside, the good thing is there's no mask requirements for outside. There's no bans. Still socially distanced, but outside offers a lot of freedom. So hopefully, by June 28th, maybe we'll be closer to phase 3, and that would be awesome. So if you're bringing your kids on June 28th, there's not going to be a nursery. There's not going to be kids. They're all going to be worshiping with us. So bring some chairs for them to sit with you. Maybe bring an umbrella for shade. I'm hoping it's not raining on June 28th. That's my prayer. So y'all pray with me about it. Let's start right now. Praying, Lord, don't let there be rain on June 28th. Let it be cool. Maybe a light jacket kind of weather. Let's make it great. Let's really pray for the best of weather. That being said, hey, by the way, if you have a prayer request, feel free to click the link up in the description. We want to pray with you. Maybe something God has blessed you with. I've heard so many encouraging praise items over the last couple of days. God is moving in our church body right now, and I know we can't see each other, but good things are happening, and we'd love to celebrate with you the praise items, as well as pray for the issues you're praying with and praying over. So Y'all, I have really enjoyed our first chapter in Proverbs. I'm looking forward to next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And the next time you see me, it'll be Father's Day at 9:30 and 11 on Facebook and YouTube. And we're going to have a great service this weekend. Thank you guys for being the church, for making the decisions of our leadership and our staff easy. You've been so supportive. I really, honestly, I've not had the first negative comment. You guys have been supportive. We love you. We're praying for you. We miss you. We'll see you this Sunday live at 9:30 and 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube. Have a great week.